The rain had started just after dusk, turning the dirt roads into rivers and the wind into something mournful. I was locking up the barn when I saw him, half shadow, half man, standing on the other side of the fence, soaked to the bone. He didn't wave or shout. Just stood there, like the storm had delivered him straight to my land. I should have told him to move on. It's what any cautious man would do out here, miles from the nearest neighbor. But there was something about the way he looked at me, tired, hollow-eyed, like the world had worn him thin. I unlatched the gate. "You need shelter?" I asked, my voice nearly swallowed by the wind. He nodded once. "Just for the night. I'll be gone by morning." I led him into the house, and he stepped in like someone unused to being invited. The fire in the hearth was weak, but he moved close to it, holding his hands out like he might disappear without the heat. I gave him a towel and a dry flannel shirt. He changed in silence. Over a dinner of reheated stew and black coffee, we said little. He gave me a name, Eli, and little else. I didn't press. He looked like a man with reasons for keeping things buried. I told him this place used to belong to my grandfather, that I stayed to keep it running. He nodded, like he understood what it meant to hold on to something that kept you from drifting. By the time we finished eating, the wind was howling. I offered him the cot in the mudroom, but the window was cracked and the draft unforgiving. The only real warmth was in the living room, where I'd laid out a sleeping bag near the fire. There wasn't another. "We'll have to share," I said, half expecting him to decline. But he didn't hesitate. The bag was narrow, forcing us close. At first, we lay stiff and wordless, two strangers wedged between warmth and discomfort. But slowly, I felt him shift, inching toward me like gravity itself was pulling him in. His arm brushed mine, his breath warm against my neck. Then he moved closer still, no hesitation, no words, until our chests touched. He rested a hand on my side, gentle, grounding. My heart stammered. We shared a sleeping bag to keep warm, but that still wasn't close enough for him. He pulled me in like he needed to feel my heartbeat against his own. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let it happen, unsure if I was offering comfort or taking it. And somewhere between the crackle of the fire and the hush of the rain, I felt something fragile forming between us. Something not yet named, but impossible to ignore. By morning, I told myself, it would be nothing. Just a moment born from cold and storm. But I already knew better. The storm didn't let up the next day, nor the day after. The roads were washed out, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath beneath the grey skies. Eli stayed, moving through the house like someone trying not to take up too much space, but each hour stretched the silence between us into something else, something intimate. He wasn't just passing time. He helped without asking, feeding the horses, mending the broken hinge on the chicken coop, even splitting logs when the firewood stack ran low. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was with careful words, like every sentence had been sifted through years of caution. "Never had a place like this," he said one afternoon while brushing down the mare. "Quiet, solid." "You get used to it," I replied, but he shook his head. "I don't want to get used to it. I want to earn it." That made me pause. It wasn't the kind of thing a drifter said. At night, we fell into a rhythm. 2 bowls, 2 spoons, a shared pot of coffee. When he laughed, it was sudden, almost surprised, like joy had snuck up on him. I began to learn the small things. He slept facing the window, hated onions, hummed under his breath when he thought no one was listening, and I caught myself watching him more than I should have, drawn in by something gentle beneath the guarded surface. The cot remained untouched. Even when the nights warmed, he always joined me by the fire. Our bodies no longer clung out of necessity, but choice. The space between us vanished entirely, like it had never existed. He touched my hand one night and didn't pull away. His thumb brushed against my knuckles like he was memorizing the feel of them. When the kiss came, it wasn't urgent. It was a question, a hesitant surrender. I answered without thinking. Afterward, he leaned his forehead against mine, his voice a breath. I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. I didn't ask what this meant. I was afraid if I named it, it might vanish. Days passed. We worked side by side. I found myself clearing out the spare room, fixing up the door, imagining his boots by it come winter. I stopped counting how long he'd been here. It didn't feel temporary anymore. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the pasture gold, Eli stood beside me on the porch. He looked out over the fields like he was seeing them for the first time. "You make me feel like I can stop running," he said. I didn't answer. I just reached for his hand. Whatever we had, it felt real, steady, like something built, not borrowed. But even then, part of me wondered how long something like that could really last. It began with small things, barely noticeable at first. A hammer missing from the tool bench, a $20 bill gone from the jar above the fridge. I told myself I'd misplaced them, that I was distracted, maybe even careless. Eli never said a word, and I never asked. Then came the late-night phone calls. He'd step outside into the dark, cupping his phone like a secret, his voice low and urgent. When he came back in, he'd smile, too wide, and press a kiss to my temple as if to erase the questions he knew I wasn't asking. One evening, I returned from town to find the truck gone. No note, no message, just silence and an empty driveway. Hours passed, dusk fell. I sat on the porch watching the road, trying not to imagine him gone for good. When the headlights finally returned, relief hit me hard enough to make me dizzy. But it didn't last. Eli stepped out of the truck with the wrong kind of energy, nervous, distracted, eyes darting like someone expecting to be followed. I asked where he'd gone. "Just needed to clear my head," he said, tossing me the keys, like it didn't matter. I nodded, pretending that answer satisfied me, though my chest felt hollow. We didn't talk much that night. He lay beside me, his arm draped around my waist, and I let him. But I didn't sleep. A few days later, I was fixing a gate when my neighbor, old Tom, pulled up. "That the fella staying with you?" he asked, squinting toward the house. "Saw him in town, talking to some guy I've seen around with the parole crowd. Looked like they were up to something." I tried to smile it off, but the pit in my stomach had already formed. That night, I asked Eli who he'd been meeting in town. "No one important," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You sure?" I pressed. He turned to me, and for a moment, I saw it, the crack in the mask. Then it was gone. "I'm here, aren't I?" he whispered, reaching for my hand. "You're the only thing that feels real to me." The words were perfect, too perfect. They hung in the air like smoke, soft, beautiful, and impossible to hold. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe that what we had was more than a passing comfort. But doubt had already taken root, and every look, every silence between us fed it. That night, as he pulled me close under the weight of the same sleeping bag, I felt him bury his face against my neck. His grip was tighter than usual, like he was trying to fuse himself into me. "Don't break me," I whispered. He didn't answer. He just held on. And in that moment, I knew something was unraveling, quietly, beneath the surface. Something I wouldn't be able to stop. I woke to an unnatural silence, the kind that presses against your chest before your mind fully catches up. The fire had burned out. The space beside me in the sleeping bag was cold. I sat up, heart thudding. The front door stood ajar, swaying slightly in the morning breeze. Eli was gone. The truck, gone. His coat, gone. My wallet, the small lockbox under the bed, gone. I stood in the middle of the room, barefoot on the wooden floor, the air suddenly too still. The only sound was the distant groan of the wind moving through the trees. No note, no trace of him, save for the faint smell of pine on the blanket and a coffee mug still half full on the table. I didn't move for a long time. It wasn't shock, more like the slow realization that the story had ended while I was still living in the middle of it. The sheriff came by 2 days later after someone reported the truck, abandoned near the county line. Nothing inside, no prints, no signs of where he'd gone next. "Want to file a report?" the sheriff asked, his pen already poised. I shook my head. What could I say? That I let a stranger into my home, into my bed, into my life. That I handed over not just keys and trust, but something deeper. He didn't just steal what could be replaced. He took the version of myself that believed in him. I stayed quiet. Nights became long again. I cooked for one, fed the animals, fixed the fence he never finished. Every corner of the ranch felt like it still held pieces of him. His laugh echoing faintly in the barn, his humming drifting through the kitchen. But those were just ghosts, memory clinging to the edges of routine. I found a video on my old phone one evening, a short clip. Eli holding the camera, filming us fixing the fence. My face half hidden under a cap, his voice behind the lens, laughing. "You're really bad at this," he teased. "You're not even helping," I shot back, smiling without knowing I was being recorded. He had captured me happy, without warning, without armor. I watched it twice before deleting it. Some things don't deserve to be kept. Still, sometimes, when it rains, I sit by the window and remember the first night. How he looked standing in the storm, eyes like he'd been searching for something he never really meant to find. He came in from the rain, and I gave him warmth, shelter, and my heart. He left with all three, and not a single goodbye. And still, part of me waits, just in case the storm ever brings him back.